will not stop working until we get every hostage back home with their families and loved ones.
If I leave, they win. If I leave, the bullies take place. This is bullying.
If you're inside the Beltway and you're watching politics every day, the debates matter. But fantastic reception from people on the ground. I mean, the real working people in America.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. 6 more hostages have now been freed by Hamas. That's according to the Israeli military. And this happened as the ceasefire extended for a 7th day. That's in addition to 2 other hostages who were released earlier today. No Americans, though, were part of the release. This comes as 3 people were killed in a shooting at a bus stop in Jerusalem. Hamas has claimed responsibility for that attack. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. Weijia, what's the latest?
Well, Bob, we are still wondering about a 3rd American. She is a woman, and we know that as part of the initial hostage agreement, she was eligible to be released. And so far, we also have been tracking the release of course, that 4-year-old little girl, as well as another American woman. But as you mentioned, Bob, no Americans were released today. And so the administration has provided little details, only to say that they will continue to press for all unaccounted for Americans to be freed. And certainly they are celebrating this extension as another victory for the hostages, for the people who have been held by Hamas, and for humanitarian aid that is able to get in as a result of this temporary ceasefire. The president had said that he was hoping there would be an extension as long as hostages kept coming out. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Robert?
Weijia, Hamas claims responsibility for the attack in Jerusalem. What does that mean for the United States as it approaches this crisis?
Well, John Kirby, who is the spokesperson for the National Security Council, of course, condemned the attack today and said it was a reminder of the brutal ambition of Hamas to kill Israelis. But he also said, even though he offered a disclaimer that he was not a lawyer, that because this happened in Jerusalem, that he did not think it would impact the truce that is ongoing for now between the Israelis and Hamas. And so while they condemned the attack, they did not seem to think it would affect the work that they continue to do to try to get people to safety and more aid into Gaza.
And Weijia, what about Secretary of State Antony Blinken? What is he doing behind the scenes and in front of the camera to deal with this issue?
Well, he is in Israel right now meeting with officials in Tel Aviv, and he really wanted to send the message again in person that the U.S. believes it is imperative for Israel to minimize the number of civilian casualties and to make sure that Palestinians, if they want to, after the war, are able to return to Gaza. And today I did ask John Kirby whether there would be any conditions put on more aid for Israel. For example, proposals that other Democrats are fighting over right now on Capitol Hill to make sure that Israel commits to a plan to reduce the number of civilian casualties, or that all U.S. weapons supplied are used within the boundaries of humanitarian law. And Kirby basically said no, that the administration was not prepared to attach conditions, and that is not what Secretary Blinken is there to do either, but rather just to hit home the message that, you know, they need to be doing everything they can to reduce the number of civilian deaths.
Weijia Jiang on top of this high stakes and fast moving story. Thank you for your reporting. New York Republican Congressman George Santos is defiant ahead of a vote on whether to expel him from Congress. Speaking on the House floor today, he criticized sharply the lawmakers who are seeking to remove him.
It is a predetermined necessity for some members in this body to engage in this smear campaign to destroy me. I will not stand by quietly. They want me out of this body. The people of the 3rd District of New York sent me here. If they want me out, they're going to have to go silence those people and take the hard vote.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now. Scott, great to see you. Tell us more about your reporting today on Capitol Hill.
George Santos told me unequivocally he is not going to resign and prevent whatever spectacle is sure to break out tomorrow. It would be only the 6th ever expulsion of a U.S. House member. It would be political theater, but he says he wants his Republican colleagues to take the tough vote, arguing to me that this would be a tough vote. It's just not clear, Bob. It's going to be a tough vote for his fellow Republicans. One of those New York Republicans who's been pushing this expulsion measure told me that it has to happen now, that Santos's departure can't wait until next year. Take a listen to Mark Molinaro.
He's not running for re-election. Why not just let him finish his term?
Yeah, we are to govern ourselves, and he has manufactured an entire persona to defraud voters of the honest choice to have a representative that they want here in Congress. He has defrauded donors using campaign cash for his own personal benefit. There are standards. We have to uphold them.
Santos also told me that he thinks this is going to trigger a tit for tat, a retaliation of members trying to expel each other or censure each other more frequently if he's expelled tomorrow. But Bob, his critics say he's one of a kind. This is a standalone case, not likely to be repeated.
Scott, you did have a chance to speak with Congressman Santos. What did he have to say?
Well, he was unambiguous. He says that this is political. He says he's being bullied. He says this is motivated not by an attempt to do right, but by an attempt to do him harm. Let's take a listen to more of George Santos.
Is there any expectation that if you resign, you could avoid the spectacle tomorrow?
No, hey, you know what? Let's make everybody take a tough vote. That's what matters.
Do you think it might be a tough vote for the other fellow Republicans?
Yeah, you know what? Setting precedent.
You think there's going to be a tit for tat that comes out of that?
What do you mean tit for tat?
If they expel you, you think they may trigger more expulsions? More?
Oh, it's going to be a circus moving forward. It's going to be, oh, you're accused. You're getting expelled. They want to do this to me. I'm going to make them do it to themselves.
I'll just tell you the response from his critics. They say it's already a circus, which they want to end tomorrow.
Scott, what about the Republican leadership in the House, the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, the Majority Leader, Steve Scalise? Where are they landing on this issue?
He's getting some support on this expulsion measure from a range of people inside the Republican conference, Bob. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, has said that he's not a big fan of the expulsion, that it might set a bad precedent like we just addressed. Steve Scalise says he'd rather wait for George Santos to have his day in court, which isn't scheduled till September. That's when his trial begins in those federal criminal cases to which he's pleaded not guilty. And there are also the people sitting behind him on the screen there. Matt Gaetz of Florida, Troy Nehls of Texas, two people who say he deserves more time and that he deserves more due process. But Bob, it's his fellow Republicans from New York really driving this train, and they say serving in Congress is a higher privilege, that you don't get due criminal process to continue to serve in the House. And it looks like they say the votes have already lined up. We find out tomorrow. 2/3 of those present voting must vote to expel him. For him to be expelled, it's a high bar, but his detractors are confident they're going to surmount it.
And Scott, just in about 20, 30 seconds, is Senator Tommy Tuberville going to drop his hold on military nominations?
Now, he has been stringing this out over the last few days, saying there is likely to be a change soon, potentially next week. But it didn't happen today before senators left town, and some of his critics say he keeps stringing them along. So we'll see if there's a move when they return here on Tuesday.
Scott McFarland, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Now, former Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger, he has died at age 100. He served under Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, shaping U.S. foreign policy for decades and leaving a very complicated legacy. Some critics have described him as a war criminal. Others have praised him. He shared a Nobel Peace Prize in 1973 for his involvement in talks aimed at ending the Vietnam War. Kissinger gave advice on foreign affairs to several presidents well into his later years. In the long-running feud between Governor Gavin Newsom and Governor Ron DeSantis, it takes center stage tonight. The two governors will face off in a televised debate. What to expect is coming up next. You're streaming America Decides. Earlier, I spoke with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign manager, James Uthmeyer. James, of course, the audience, Republican voters across the country watching this closely, but perhaps also some Wall Street financiers, Republican donors. Some of them, as you know, have been going toward former Ambassador Nikki Haley in recent weeks. Have you been encouraging the financial crowd of the GOP to pay attention to tonight's debate and to maybe make sure they're listening to Governor DeSantis when it comes to making that final decision on where they're going to put their money in support?
Sure. Well, Ron DeSantis is focused more on grassroots support. We had a record-breaking, over 15 million raised last quarter. The establishment class, they don't always like the grassroots candidate. An establishment class that believes in jailbreak bills and open borders, they're going to go for a candidate like Nikki Haley, who's recently stated that she was inspired to run by Hillary Clinton. She is not a true conservative. Her record depicts that. She tried to, prevent a bathroom bill that would protect women in the bathroom from getting passed. She is not a true conservative. And the establishment, their class cannot win.
That has been fact-checked by others about how Nikki Haley was not saying she was inspired by the political ideology of Clinton, but we'll leave that there. James Uthmeyer, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
And a programming note, we will have special coverage of the 4th Republican presidential debate in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, next Wednesday night. Join us at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for an hour-long edition of America Decides, and then again at 10 p.m. for analysis live after the debate. But for now, after the break, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum joins us to discuss his bid for the presidency. You're streaming America Decides.
We reevaluated, and whenever you look at what's happened in the last 60 days, you've had multiple candidates drop out of the race. You've narrowed the field down to 6 or 7 candidates, which is a level that is fairly traditional, if not smaller, than in previous races.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Republican presidential candidate Asa Hutchinson talking about his chances in the GOP race, and we're less than a week away from the 4th primary debate. Some candidates are still out there vying to secure their spot on the stage. North Dakota Governor and Republican presidential candidate Doug Burgum joins us now. Governor, thanks for taking a few minutes. What's your path ahead in this nomination race? You're not going to be on the next debate stage, but you are plowing ahead in the early voting states.
Well, Robert, great to be with you. And we're spending a lot of time on the ground in both Iowa and New Hampshire, getting a lot of positive feedback from voters. They're wishing that the debate criteria included that you had to have created jobs in the private sector, that you've had to work in technology, and that you've worked on a farm and ranch some point in your life, because it's hard to imagine that we're eliminating candidates that have, remaining candidates do not have substantial experience in the private sector. So this is just an interesting thing where we're falling back 100 years. To where, party insiders, 2 people at the RNC and pollsters are deciding and who's going to be on the debate stage based on national criteria, not on state criteria. And I think that you talk to anybody on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire, and they're very disappointed with the RNC in terms of taking away their power as the people that actually screen and narrow the field. That's their job. That's not part of the charter or the mandate of the RNC.
Have you spoken to the RNC chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, about this? Have you tried to get on the debate stage? And have you made an argument, whether publicly or privately, especially, about how this is all set up? You've never been able to get on the debate stage after that first debate. Have you told her it's unfair? Have you talked to RNC members?
Well, we made 2 debates, Robert. We're on the first one. We were at the one at the Reagan Library, the second one. And for the third one, we had met the criteria for Iowa, New Hampshire, and the number of donors. We just missed the national criteria by, 0.8%. And so, yeah, we've publicly made our feelings known about this, but they continue to go ahead and feel like somehow it's their responsibility to try to narrow the field. And again, I recommend anybody read the book that was out in the last few years called Let the People Rule, the story of how Teddy Roosevelt got the power out of the party bosses and into the hands of primary voters. That's why we have things like the First the Nation primary in New Hampshire, which began over 100 years ago, was because it was to actually let the voters. The voters are the ones that get to pick presidents to narrow the field, not the pollsters, but we're going backwards with this.
What's your plan now? Do you stay in the race through Super Tuesday and hope maybe it all comes around to you? Or if the RNC continues to keep you off the debate stage, do you decide at some point to wrap it up?
Well, I think one thing, again, if you're inside the Beltway and you're watching politics every day, the debates matter. But we've had fantastic reception from people on the ground. I mean, the real working people in America. Guess what? They're not watching the debates. I mean, only half as many people watched the third debate as the first debate. And a lot of people that have watched some of the debates said, hey, I wish I could get those 2 hours of my life back. Because if they're designed to set up inter-candidate conflict as opposed to actually help voters understand who's got relative experience in terms of leadership and who's actually proven. I mean, if you had a debate criteria that said, hey, you have to have actually cut government spending to be on the debate stage, I'd be the only candidate up there. I've created more jobs than the rest of them on the stage altogether when we were at the Reagan Library. So the debate criteria seems completely arbitrary, and I think voters understand that.
When you look at how this race is developing, Nikki Haley, the former ambassador, getting a lot of support from the business community. You're from the business community. What's your message to Jamie Dimon and other business leaders who say it's time to get behind Haley?
Well, I think it's interesting because you know, the narrative this week is the race is over because the money is moving. Well, you know, before we even got in this race, I was told the race was over because other candidates had all the money. And I think I've gone through 3 different candidates were the ones that had all the money since June 7th that are going to be unbeatable because they have all the money. And it turns out we know that whether you're Bloomberg or whoever you are, you know, money isn't the thing that necessarily matters. It matters in terms of the connection with voters. And so, you know, fundraising has been an interesting challenge. I think less so because of anything other than the fact that we've got a, former president running almost as an incumbent in this race. So that makes this different than, I guess, anything since Grover Cleveland timeframe. But it's that part's been challenging, but it's great that the business community is getting engaged. That's for sure, because there's a lot riding on this for America.
And Governor, quickly, actions always speak in politics. Where are you spending your time in the coming weeks before the holiday?
Well, the schedule that we've been following the last month and we've got laid out, I'm in New Hampshire right now today, be here through Sunday, and scheduled next week is to take us back to Iowa, where we spent the week before Thanksgiving.
Governor Burgum, thank you for swinging by. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Robert. Great to see you always.
That does it for today. You're streaming CBS News.